On May 21, 2025, the warm waters around Exuma, Bahamas sparkled under a bright sun. White sand beaches, blue skies, and crystal-clear tides made the perfect setting for a luxury social media retreat. The event had been organized by Margot Liu, a travel influencer known for filming ocean trips, private tours, and high-end group adventures. She had over 1 million followers and had built her brand around unique outdoor experiences. This retreat was her most exclusive yet, carefully planned for a hand-picked group of content creators. The trip was meant to mix work and leisure. Guests attended morning workshops, spent afternoons exploring the coast, and posted highlights each evening. On the third day, Margot arranged a private shark swimming session. The team was told it was safe, with local guides on site. The area was shallow and calm, and the sharks were known for mild behavior. The species involved was the lemon shark, which usually stayed near the bottom and avoided conflict. Among the guests was Maddie Choi, a 19-year-old lifestyle vlogger who had just finished her first year at a large university. She had built a following by sharing her travel tips and daily life with young viewers. She was excited for the chance to swim near marine life and had posted photos in her wetsuit before entering the water. Also attending was Cam Barlow, a fitness coach and wellness speaker with a strong presence online. He had joined the trip to promote ocean workouts and share content about outdoor movement. The group entered the water around midday. The guide reminded everyone to stay calm and keep their feet low. The lemon sharks swam slowly in wide circles, their yellow-tinted bodies casting shadows under the surface. At first, everything felt peaceful. Cameras floated beside them and laughter echoed from the boat. Then something sharp cut through the moment. Maddie brushed her foot against a jagged coral piece, tearing open her ankle. She cried out and kicked hard without thinking. Blood spread into the water fast, turning the clear waves pink. Her quick movement drew attention. The sharks, once slow and distant, began swimming faster. One brushed past her side, then another turned sharply. Within seconds, one of the sharks bit Maddie on the lower leg. She tried to pull away, but the force knocked her backward. Cam noticed the commotion and moved toward her. As he reached out, another shark lunged and bit his arm. A second bite followed to his upper leg. Water churned as people screamed and rushed toward the boat. Guides shouted and splashed to distract the animals. The sharks kept circling as the group tried to escape. Cam floated with help from another swimmer. Maddie clung to a rope trailing behind the boat. Blood mixed with waves as more crew members jumped in to help. One of the guides reached Maddie first, holding her above the surface while another staff member pulled the rope from the boat. Her leg was weak and bleeding, and her face showed panic and confusion. Cam was farther out, floating with help from another swimmer. The area around him was stained and his arms moved slowly. The crew acted fast, tossing out flotation gear and helping others reach safety. The sharks circled once more before swimming off toward the reef. The water calmed, but the damage had been done. Both injured guests were pulled onto the deck. Towels were placed under their wounds, and pressure was applied to slow the bleeding. The rest of the group sat silently, shocked by what had just happened. Cameras were turned off and phones were placed aside. The boat radioed for help, and a team on land prepared a medical flight. Tour staff kept Maddie awake, checking her pulse and supporting her head. Cam was alert but clearly in pain. His arm and leg had deep marks that continued to leak fluid. The ride back to shore was fast, with everyone holding tightly as waves slapped against the sides. An emergency vehicle waited on the dock. Paramedics lifted both guests onto stretchers and carried them into the medical center. Doctors began treatment right away. Maddie's injury was serious but could be repaired. Cam had multiple bites that needed strong care and possible surgery. Both were given medicine to reduce pain and prevent infection. News of the retreat spread within hours. Photos and short clips made their way online, followed by reports from media outlets. Viewers were shocked that such a dangerous event had happened during a planned activity. Many asked why the group had been taken so close to wild animals with limited protection. Margot released a statement and canceled the rest of the retreat. She flew home the next day and did not post for several weeks. Questions were raised about the rules for ocean tours. Officials in the area spoke about needing stronger checks for similar trips. Guides who had been on the boat gave their own accounts, and safety experts reviewed the footage. They noted that the combination of injury, blood, and panic could change animal behavior fast, even with less aggressive species. Maddie returned home after a short hospital stay. She wore a brace and used a walking support while healing. Cam spent more time in recovery. His wounds required more care and future procedures. He later shared his thoughts online, warning others about the risks of close contact with sea predators. Margot faced legal trouble and was asked to attend multiple interviews. Some sponsors ended deals with her while others waited. The trip that was meant to grow her brand became a source of stress and public judgment. The retreat was over, but its memory stayed strong. Calm water could still hide danger, and even safe moments could shift without warning. For those who were there, the lesson was lasting. On September 3, 2024, the open waters near the Azores Islands looked calm after 2 days of heavy rain and wind. The sky had cleared, the waves had settled, and a single sailboat floated quietly between swells. On board was Eli Becker, a 46-year-old man from Maine, who had spent most of his adult life around boats. He was halfway through a solo journey across the Atlantic Ocean, something he had dreamed of since he was young. Eli was a former boat mechanic and part-time sailing instructor. He had fixed engines in freezing harbors and guided groups through calm bays in summer. He believed that time at sea taught more than any classroom could. After years of working for others, he bought a used sailboat, fixed it by hand, and planned a long solo trip. It was his way of testing patience, skill, and freedom. The storm 2 nights earlier had pushed strong winds through his route. Waves had shaken the boat and ropes had snapped loose. By morning things were better, but the steering had become tight. Eli checked the controls and noticed a tangle of lines caught around the rudder. He anchored close to the islands and decided to go into the water to clear the problem. He wore a simple mask and moved down the side of the boat with care. The water was deep and clear. Beneath the surface, thin ropes danced near the rudder. He reached out and began loosening the knots, pulling each line away one by one. After several dives, the area around the propeller was nearly clean. As he rose toward the surface one final time, a fast shadow moved in from the deeper water. A short-finned mako shark, strong and fast, shot upward with sudden force. The animal had likely been drawn by the splash and the sound of movement near the hull. Without slowing down, it struck Eli's arm just below the elbow. Its sharp teeth sliced through skin and muscle in seconds. The pain came instantly. Blood clouded the water as the shark turned and disappeared. Eli kicked hard, reaching for the side of the boat. His arm hung beside him, torn and bleeding. He grabbed the rail with his free hand and dragged himself up, shaking and gasping for air. Once on the deck, he collapsed, holding his injured arm close. The blood dripped onto the wooden boards, soaking into a folded cloth near his feet. The boat rocked slightly under him. The nearest help was hours away, and no one else was there to assist. He had trained for many problems at sea, but not for this. Eli stayed on the deck, trying to remain awake. His arm pulsed with pain, and the bleeding had not stopped. He reached for a folded sail near the edge of the boat and used it to press down on the wound. With slow, steady hands, he wrapped the cloth around his arm and tied it with a loose cord from the cabin rail. His breath was short and his vision faded in and out, but he knew he had to act quickly. He crawled to the radio, which was bolted to the side wall inside the boat's control space. His fingers moved clumsily, but he managed to turn the device on and send out a message. He gave his name, location, and condition in short bursts. Then he slumped back, holding his arm with what little strength remained. The sea around him was quiet. The clouds drifted slowly overhead and the boat creaked in the gentle rise and fall of the waves. The reply from rescue came through minutes later. Help was on the way, but it would take time. Eli understood that. He leaned against the base of the mast and closed his eyes. Each moment felt longer than the one before. His body was shaking, and his skin was pale. He focused on small things to stay alert. The sound of rope tapping against metal, the smell of salt, the sway of the boom in the breeze. More than 5 hours passed before the rescue vessel appeared on the horizon. It moved fast and straight, cutting across the water with purpose. When it reached him, a team boarded his boat and checked his arm. The cloth was soaked and his pulse was weak. They lifted him onto their deck, cleaned the wound as best they could, and started fluids to keep him stable. He was taken to a hospital on the nearest island. Doctors worked to repair the damage, but the muscles in his hand had lost too much strength. He regained feeling in most of his arm, but parts of his hand remained stiff and slow. Over time, he adjusted, but the changes were permanent. Eli never returned to solo sailing. He sold his boat and began sharing his story with others. He spoke at small sailing schools, safety programs, and marine workshops. His focus shifted from adventure to awareness. He taught others how to prepare for rare events and how to respect the sea in every condition. The shark that struck him was never seen again. Experts said it likely mistook the motion for prey and reacted with instinct. No follow-up attacks were recorded in the area. Local rules for anchoring near deep channels were reviewed and extra caution was advised. Eli's journey was cut short, but his story became part of something larger. His survival reminded others that control at sea is never guaranteed, and nature always holds the final word. July 10, 2025, the heat hung heavy over the Gulf of Mexico as the crew of an offshore oil rig prepared for another long day of maintenance work. Among them was 39-year-old Derek Shaw, a technician known for his precision and calm attitude during stressful jobs. Born and raised in Corpus Christi, Texas, Derek had spent over a decade working on rigs across the coast. His experience made him a reliable team member, especially during complex repairs in tough weather. Derek had always been drawn to the ocean. In his free time, he enjoyed deep-sea fishing and took photos of marine life with his waterproof camera. He was the kind of person who always volunteered for tasks that required patience and attention to detail. His crew trusted him, especially on routine days like this one. That morning, Derek was assigned to inspect equipment located near the outer edge of the floating dock. The sea looked calm, but under the surface, unseen movement stirred. The night before, some workers had tossed leftover fish parts from dinner into the water, a practice discouraged but still done by a few. The smell of raw fish had likely traveled fast through the warm current, drawing the attention of a bull shark known to cruise these waters. As the sun climbed higher, Derek stepped carefully onto the dock, carrying a small toolkit in one hand. His boots made wet sounds against the slick surface. He was focused on a stuck valve near the edge of the rig and leaned forward to adjust a fitting. His balance shifted slightly and he tried to steady himself, but a patch of algae made the platform slippery. In a flash, he slipped, lost his footing, and hit the water with a loud splash. The moment his body hit the surface, sound waves moved quickly through the sea. Below, the bull shark responded instantly. The shark had likely been circling beneath the platform, already on high alert due to the scent and movement above. Within seconds, it rose from the depths and aimed toward the disturbance. As Derek struggled to turn himself upright in the cloudy water, the shark charged forward. Its powerful jaws locked around his left forearm with crushing pressure. Sharp teeth tore through the skin, slicing deep into muscle and tissue. Derek thrashed, trying to break free as blood mixed with the salt water around him. On the rig, nearby workers heard the splash, followed by shouting. They rushed to the railing and spotted the red cloud spreading below. One crew member threw a rope while another ran to grab the emergency gaff pole. A third worker hit the alarm button, alerting the on-site medic. The shark let go after a few more seconds and disappeared back into the deep, leaving Derek floating and gasping in pain. His co-workers hauled him up using the rope and gaff, struggling against his weight and the choppy movement of the dock. Once back on the deck, his forearm hung badly wounded, blood dripping rapidly down his side. His face was pale and his breath came in short, panicked bursts. The team moved quickly to respond, knowing every second mattered. The crew laid Derek flat on a clean surface near the emergency supply cabinet. A senior worker opened a large case and pulled out bandages, wraps, and gloves. The medic checked for pulse and breathing, while another worker used a thick cloth to apply pressure to the deep wound. Derek's arm was badly torn, with muscle tissue exposed, and the lower part of his sleeve was soaked in red. His eyes remained open, but he was slipping in and out of full awareness. The medic wrapped a wide elastic strip above the injured area to slow the bleeding. He then secured the dressing tightly over the torn flesh and placed Derek's arm on a folded jacket to support it. A nearby worker contacted the main station by radio and gave their position, reporting that they needed airlift assistance as fast as possible. The request was marked urgent. A helicopter was already scheduled for a supply drop, so it was rerouted to assist with evacuation. While waiting, the team shaded Derek from the heat and gave him water in small amounts to help with the shock. They monitored his breathing and made sure he stayed warm using clean covers from the bunk room. 45 minutes passed before the helicopter appeared through the afternoon sky. It hovered above the landing pad as a winch lowered a stretcher. Medics in bright uniforms guided Derek into place and lifted him steadily. As the helicopter flew away, the platform workers stood quietly, watching until it disappeared over the horizon. Back on land, Derek was rushed to a hospital where surgeons cleaned and repaired the injury. The bite had damaged multiple layers of skin and tissue. Though the doctors saved most of the arm, nerve damage reduced full movement in his hand. After several days in recovery, Derek was moved to a rehabilitation center where he began physical therapy. The event made headlines across regional news. Photos of the oil platform and interviews with other crew members were shared online. Safety officials visited the site and reviewed policies. They found that waste had been dumped off the side several times during the week, increasing the chance of attracting large animals. New rules were placed on the platform. Food scraps were banned from all open areas. Workers received extra training about sea conditions and were reminded to wear improved traction footwear. Cameras were added around the lower decks to help monitor underwater activity. A special safety rail was also installed around the floating dock where the incident had taken place. Derek returned home after several months. Though he could not go back to heavy physical work, he stayed connected with the industry. He gave talks to new workers about what he had learned and how fast things could change at sea. He used his experience to help improve safety programs across other platforms in the region. The shark was not seen again near the rig, but research teams began tagging efforts to study behavior in that part of the Gulf. The event remained a strong reminder that routine moments offshore could turn dangerous when nature gets too close. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly in all directions from the USS Leviathan's position, approximately 200 nautical miles southwest of Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, in the summer of 2015. This particular stretch of deep blue water had served as a training ground for the United States Navy's most elite diving units for over 4 decades. Petty Officer First Class Marcus Delacroix had volunteered for this particular deep-sea training mission, eager to demonstrate his expertise in underwater hull maintenance procedures. The 28-year-old Navy diver from Louisiana possessed an impressive service record, having completed over 300 successful deep-water dives during his 8-year career. His specialty involved complex welding and cutting operations on submarine hulls, skills that proved invaluable during both routine maintenance and emergency repairs in hostile environments. The training exercise simulated a scenario where a submarine had suffered minor hull damage while submerged, requiring immediate underwater repairs to prevent catastrophic flooding. Marcus and his dive partner, Seaman Rodriguez, descended to a depth of 180 feet, where a decommissioned submarine hull section had been strategically positioned for training purposes. The mock repair involved cutting away damaged plating and welding replacement sections into place, all while maintaining neutral buoyancy and managing limited air supplies. Marcus methodically approached his assigned section of the hull, his movements deliberate and economical to conserve oxygen. The underwater cutting torch ignited successfully, its bright flame creating an otherworldly glow in the dark water. Sparks cascaded downward like falling stars as he began sectioning the predetermined area, completely focused on achieving clean, precise cuts that would allow for proper patch installation. The oceanic white-tip shark appeared without warning, materializing from the blue void beyond the range of the dive lights. This particular species was notorious among marine biologists for its bold and inquisitive nature, as well as its tendency to investigate unfamiliar objects or disturbances in its territory. The approaching predator measured approximately 10 feet in length, its distinctive white-tipped fins visible as it began circling the work area with growing interest. Initially, Marcus barely noticed the shark's presence, his attention consumed by the demanding technical work at hand. Rodriguez spotted the creature first and attempted to signal his partner, but Marcus remained engrossed in his cutting operation. The oceanic white-tipped circles grew progressively tighter. Its behavior shifted from casual curiosity to a focused investigation of these strange intruders in its domain. The shark's first approach was almost gentle, a slow glide past Marcus's position that brought it within arm's reach of the working diver. The predator seemed particularly interested in the bright sparks and unusual sounds emanating from the cutting torch, phenomena unlike anything it had previously encountered in these deep waters. Marcus finally registered the creature's presence when its massive shadow passed directly over his work area, temporarily blocking the artificial lighting. What followed was a lightning-fast strike that caught Marcus completely off guard. The oceanic white-tip lunged forward with explosive power, its powerful jaws clamping down on Marcus's left leg just above the knee. The shark's teeth penetrated the thick neoprene of his diving suit. They punctured the underlying flesh, sending waves of crushing pain through the diver's body, despite the protective gear's considerable thickness. Marcus's training immediately kicked in, overriding the natural panic response that threatened to overwhelm his rational thinking. He maintained his grip on the cutting torch while using his free hand to reach for the dive knife, which was secured to his belt. The shark thrashed violently, its powerful body creating turbulence that threatened to tear Marcus away from his anchor point on the submarine hull. The predator's bite pressure was immense, capable of easily crushing bone if it were allowed to maintain its grip. Marcus could feel warm blood seeping into his diving suit as the shark's teeth found purchase in his leg muscle. Fighting against both pain and the creature's thrashing movements, he managed to extract his dive knife. He began striking at the shark's sensitive snout area, targeting the ampullae of Lorenzini, which sharks use for electrical detection. Rodriguez immediately responded to his partner's distress, abandoning his workstation to assist with the emergency. He activated the team's acoustic deterrent device, a piece of equipment designed specifically for such encounters. The device emitted high-frequency sound pulses that proved effective in disrupting the shark's attack behavior, causing it to release its grip and retreat several feet from the immediate area. The oceanic whitetip circled once more, apparently considering a second attack. Still, the continued acoustic deterrent signals seemed to convince it that these particular prey items were more trouble than they were worth. The massive predator gradually faded back into the blue depths, disappearing as suddenly as it had arrived. Marcus's ascent to the surface required careful decompression stops despite his injuries, as rapid ascent could have resulted in potentially fatal decompression sickness. His dive partner maintained close contact throughout the controlled emergency ascent, monitoring Marcus's condition while remaining alert for any sign of the shark's return. Upon reaching the surface, Marcus was immediately transferred to the ship's medical facility, where Navy corpsmen worked to clean and suture his wounds. The shark's teeth had created multiple deep punctures in his leg, but fortunately, they had missed major arteries and bones. His diving suit had provided sufficient protection to prevent a truly catastrophic injury, although the psychological impact of the encounter would require considerable time to process. Marcus returned to diving duties 6 weeks later, though he admitted that deep-water operations would never feel quite the same. The encounter had taught him valuable lessons about maintaining situational awareness even during complex technical operations, and he subsequently became an advocate for enhanced shark safety protocols during Navy diving operations. In 2018, the pristine waters off Rottnest Island, Western Australia, had become increasingly popular among social media influencers, drawn by the location's crystal-clear visibility and diverse marine life. This small island, situated approximately 18 kilometers from the mainland port city of Fremantle, boasted some of the Indian Ocean's most spectacular underwater scenery. The area's unique geography, featuring limestone reefs, sandy channels, and deep-water drop-offs, created ideal conditions for both marine wildlife and underwater photography. Local authorities had documented an increase in great white shark activity around the island's southern coastline, where seasonal migrations brought these apex predators close to shore in search of abundant seal populations. Despite repeated warnings and the installation of shark detection equipment, the area's natural beauty continued to attract adventure seekers and content creators who hoped to capture dramatic footage for their online audiences. Jenna Kowalski, a 23-year-old social media personality from Perth, had built a substantial following on various platforms through her extreme adventure content. Her TikTok account, which featured increasingly dangerous stunts and encounters with wildlife, had accumulated over 2 million followers who eagerly anticipated each new upload. Jenna's content strategy relied heavily on pushing boundaries and creating shocking moments that generated viral engagement and attracted new subscribers to her various social media channels. The fateful expedition began as a planned collaboration with several other local influencers, designed to create content around swimming with sharks in their natural environment. Jenna had chartered a small dive boat operated by Jake Morrison, a local marine tour guide who had reluctantly agreed to the outing despite his reservations about the group's stated intentions. Morrison had explicitly warned his passengers about recent shark sightings and insisted on strict safety protocols, including staying in the boat while sharks were present. The morning conditions were nearly perfect for observing marine wildlife, with minimal wind, excellent visibility extending beyond 30 meters, and calm seas that allowed for steady filming. The group had traveled to a known aggregation site where great whites were frequently spotted, particularly during the winter months when they followed migrating whale pods along the continental shelf. Within an hour of reaching their destination, the first great white shark appeared, a magnificent 14-foot female that glided gracefully through the clear water approximately 50 meters from their anchored vessel. The creature's presence immediately triggered excited activity among the influencers, who began filming frantically, while Morrison provided commentary about the shark's behavior and the importance of maintaining a respectful distance. Jenna, however, had different plans for her content creation. Despite Morrison's explicit warnings and the obvious danger, she announced her intention to enter the water for close-up footage that would differentiate her content from standard wildlife observation videos. Her companions initially protested, but Jenna dismissed their concerns as she set up her waterproof camera equipment and prepared to enter the water. Morrison's attempts to prevent Jenna from leaving the boat became increasingly desperate as she moved toward the vessel's edge. He explained the legal liability issues, the extreme danger posed by the shark's presence, and the potentially fatal consequences of her planned actions. Jenna responded that she had researched great white behavior online and believed the risk was manageable if she remained calm and moved slowly. The moment Jenna entered the water, the great white's behavior changed dramatically. The shark, which had been cruising at a leisurely pace in the distance, immediately altered course and began approaching the new disturbance with obvious interest. Its movements became more purposeful and direct, displaying the focused attention that marine biologists recognized as investigative behavior that often preceded more aggressive interactions. Jenna initially appeared confident as she swam toward the approaching predator, her waterproof camera capturing footage that she believed would generate millions of views and establish her reputation as the most daring wildlife influencer on social media. She moved with deliberate slowness, attempting to emulate techniques she had seen in documentaries, while completely failing to recognize the warning signs in the shark's posture and movement patterns. The shark's approach was methodical and calculating, displaying none of the casual indifference that characterized most human shark encounters. This particular individual showed clear signs of heightened interest, possibly triggered by Jenna's surface movements or by stress chemicals released into the water. The predator circled once at a distance of approximately 10 meters before beginning a more direct approach. When Jenna reached out to touch the shark's snout, apparently believing this would create dramatic content while demonstrating her fearlessness, she crossed a critical threshold in the predator's threat assessment. The great white's response was immediate and devastating, its powerful jaws snapping shut on Jenna's extended forearm with crushing force that shattered bone and severed major blood vessels. The attack's violence was shocking in its suddenness and intensity. The shark began thrashing immediately after making contact, its powerful body twisting and rolling in the water while maintaining its grip on Jenna's arm. The predator's behavior suggested it was attempting to disorient and weaken its prey through violent manipulation, a hunting technique commonly observed when great whites attacked seals. Jenna's screams carried clearly across the water to her horrified companions, who watched helplessly as the shark dragged her beneath the surface. Morrison immediately started the boat's engines while the other influencers attempted to film the attack, their cameras capturing the spreading blood, slick and occasional glimpses of the ongoing struggle below the surface. The shark released its initial grip only to attack again, this time targeting Jenna's shoulder and torso area. The second bite was even more destructive than the first, with the predator's teeth penetrating vital organs and causing massive internal trauma. Jenna's struggles became progressively weaker, as blood loss and shock began to take their toll on her body's systems. Morrison managed to maneuver the boat closer to the attack site, where Jenna's companions made desperate attempts to pull her from the water. The shark had finally released its grip and disappeared into the depths, apparently satisfied that the threat had been neutralized or perhaps disturbed by the boat's proximity and engine noise. Jenna was unconscious when they hauled her aboard, her body bearing horrific injuries that were clearly beyond the scope of basic first aid. Morrison immediately radioed for emergency helicopter evacuation, while the other passengers attempted to control bleeding and maintain vital signs using the boat's limited medical supplies. Despite heroic efforts by emergency responders and trauma surgeons at the hospital, Jenna succumbed to her injuries approximately 3 hours after the attack. The massive blood loss and organ damage proved too extensive for medical intervention, even with the sophisticated trauma care available at one of Australia's premier medical facilities. The incident sparked intense debate about social media culture and the lengths to which content creators would go to generate viral material. Jenna's final video, recovered from her waterproof camera, became evidence in subsequent investigations rather than the viral content she had intended to create. Her death prompted new regulations regarding marine wildlife interactions and served as a stark reminder that nature's apex predators demanded respect rather than reckless attempts at fame. On the morning of September 14, 2023, the small coastal town of Gansbaai, South Africa, awoke under a thick blanket of mist that blurred the sharp edges of the rocky shore and the restless sea beyond. Two women had set out just hours earlier on a paddleboarding trip, their laughter drifting faintly on the salty breeze as they paddled away from the safety of the sheltered bay toward a reef where seals were known to gather. Anna Müller, a 28-year-old German graphic designer visiting on holiday, was full of quiet energy, keen on adventure despite her limited experience in open water. Beside her was Claire Roberts, a 34-year-old wildlife photographer from the United Kingdom, whose steady calm and love of marine life had drawn her here to capture images of the elusive great whites that frequented these waters. The morning sun barely pierced the fog as they ventured past the bay's protective walls, the boards cutting through the cold, choppy waves with ease. Witnesses from the shore recalled the carefree spirits of the two women, seeing them wave briefly before disappearing toward the reef some 3 miles out. It was a popular spot where seals hauled out, and tourists often came hoping to glimpse sharks feeding beneath the surface. But by mid-morning, a troubling sign appeared. 2 paddleboards floated back toward the shore, untethered and abandoned. One was shattered clean through the middle, its jagged edges darkened with seawater and what appeared to be traces of blood. The other bore deep gouges, like massive teeth had bitten down hard, threatening to snap it apart. The discovery sent a cold wave of dread through the town. Local authorities quickly organized a search, sending boats and volunteers to comb the water and the coastline for any sign of Anna or Claire. Days passed with no sightings, no clues, only growing fear. The ocean was vast and merciless, and the uncertainty gnawed at everyone's hope. On September 17th, after 3 agonizing days, the breakthrough came in a grim, unexpected form. Fishermen hauling their daily catch pulled up a massive great white shark, measuring a terrifying 21 feet from snout to tail. The creature was already dead, caught in illegal gill nets set too close to shore, nets that were both forbidden and deadly traps for wildlife. When the local marine biologists performed a necropsy on the shark, horror unfolded beneath the surface of its bloated stomach. Inside, they found partial human remains, unmistakably those of 2 adult females. Alongside the grisly contents were items identified as belonging to Anna and Claire: a waterproof camera with Anna's name etched faintly on its casing, and Claire's dive watch, cracked and stained but still recognizable. The forensic teams pieced together a harrowing account. At least 1 woman had been alive when attacked, her body torn and swallowed. The second may have drowned before the predator dragged her under. Her remains later consumed as well. The community reeled from the discovery. Gansbai, known for its shark cage diving tours and marine wildlife, suddenly felt a shadow creep over its identity. Tourists canceled trips. Fishermen spoke in hushed tones. The water that once shimmered with promise now seemed dark and dangerous. The attack itself, when reconstructed from evidence and witness accounts, was a brutal display of nature's power and unpredictability. On that fateful morning, the calm surface had betrayed its deadly undercurrents. Anna and Claire's paddleboards, once symbols of freedom and exploration, became silent markers of violence. The shattered board and the gouged one told the story of a violent struggle, a battle against a force that was immense and terrifyingly efficient. The great white shark, a creature perfectly adapted for the hunt, had struck swiftly. Its massive jaws had clamped onto one board, snapping it in half with a force that no human could withstand. The shark's teeth, serrated like knives, tore flesh and bone with ease. Inside the water, the 2 women fought for survival, but the cold and the predator's strength overwhelmed them. Forensic experts surmised that 1 woman likely succumbed quickly, dragged beneath the waves in a chaotic swirl of foam and blood, while the other struggled longer, her cries muffled by the roar of the sea. The shark's attack was merciless and final, a reminder of the raw cruelty hidden beneath the ocean's beauty. In the days following, investigators worked tirelessly to confirm the identities and piece together the final moments of Anna and Claire's lives. Their personal effects gave poignant glimpses into their characters. The camera, still holding some photos from the earlier part of their trip, showed smiles and sunlit memories, a stark contrast to the horror that followed. The dive watch, a gift from Claire's late father and a symbol of her love for the ocean, had stopped at 7:42 a.m., likely the moment the attack began. The case sparked renewed debates about the safety of recreational water activities in shark-inhabited waters. Conservationists and local authorities stressed the importance of respecting wildlife while ensuring public safety, but the tragedy left many questioning if some risks were too great. The families of Anna and Claire were devastated. Both women had been passionate about the sea, and their deaths left a void in the lives of those who loved them. Memorials were held on the beach where their journey began, candles flickering in the ocean breeze, voices rising in remembrance. For Gansbai, the event was a turning point. Lifeguard patrols increased, illegal fishing nets were aggressively targeted, and education programs on shark behavior were launched. But the memory of those two young women lost to the ocean's dark hunger remained vivid, a stark reminder of nature's unpredictable balance between beauty and danger. The 21-foot great white, once a majestic symbol of the sea's wildness, was now forever marked by tragedy. Its massive body, hauled from the water by fishermen's nets, carried the silent testimony of a deadly encounter that few would forget. In the depths where seals swam and sunlight barely reached, the ocean had claimed two lives, leaving behind questions that no answers could fully resolve. As the months passed, tourists returned slowly, drawn again by the allure of the shark's mysterious presence. But the stories of Anna Muller and Claire Roberts lingered, whispered by those who remembered the peaceful morning turned nightmare, a tale etched into the very waves that once carried them out to sea. False Bay, situated along South Africa's Western Cape, had maintained its status as one of the world's premier shark diving destinations well into 2020, despite fluctuating great white populations that concerned marine biologists throughout the region. Marine enthusiast Ethan Clark had spent years planning his dream trip to experience cage diving with great white sharks in their natural habitat. The 42-year-old insurance adjuster from Manchester had developed his passion for marine life through countless hours watching nature documentaries and reading scientific publications about shark behavior and conservation efforts. Despite having limited diving experience, Clark had completed advanced swimming courses. He obtained basic scuba certifications specifically to prepare for this once-in-a-lifetime adventure that represented the culmination of his lifelong fascination with ocean predators. White Shark Adventures, operated by Captain Peter Kruger, has been conducting cage diving expeditions in False Bay for over 15 years, boasting an impressive safety record that includes thousands of successful dives without serious incidents. Kruger's operation utilized specially constructed steel cages designed to withstand the impact of large predatory sharks while providing tourists with unobstructed views of these magnificent creatures. The company's safety protocols included comprehensive briefings, experienced dive guides, and emergency procedures that had been refined through years of operating in some of the world's most challenging marine environments. On November 8, 2020, weather conditions appeared ideal for Clark's long-anticipated cage diving experience. The morning brought calm seas and clear skies, with underwater visibility extending over 50 feet and water temperatures remaining comfortable for extended diving operations. The expedition departed from Gansbai Harbor, joined by Clark, who was accompanied by 5 other tourists, including marine biology student Anna Lindqvist from Sweden and retired physician Dr. Robert Chen from Vancouver, who shared Clark's enthusiasm for observing great white sharks in their natural environment. The boat anchored near Seal Island, approximately 3 miles offshore, where Captain Kruger's crew began deploying their standard chumming operation designed to attract great white sharks to the diving area. Within 20 minutes, the distinctive triangular dorsal fins of several large predators appeared around the vessel, including what marine biologist Dr. Sarah Townsend estimated to be a 14-foot great white that displayed the robust build and scarred hide characteristic of mature female specimens. The shark's behavior appeared typical for the species, showing curiosity about the boat while maintaining a respectful distance from the human activity. Clark descended into the aluminum cage alongside Lindqvist and Dr. Chen, his excitement barely contained as he observed his first live great white shark through the cage's reinforced viewing panels. The predator approached slowly, its movements displaying the fluid grace that had allowed this species to dominate marine ecosystems for millions of years. Underwater guide Tommy Mathembu monitored the group's air supplies while maintaining constant communication with the surface support team through a hardwired intercom system, which allowed for real-time coordination of the diving operation. The attack began when the great white suddenly accelerated toward the cage with explosive power, apparently triggered by the chumming operation or the diver's movements within the enclosure. The shark struck the cage's side panel with tremendous force, its massive head and jaws penetrating between 2 steel bars that had been weakened by years of exposure to corrosive saltwater. The impact bent the cage's framework, creating a gap large enough for the shark's head to enter the supposedly secure enclosure partially. Chaos erupted within the confined space as the three divers pressed themselves against the cage's far wall while the great white thrashed violently, trying to extract itself from the twisted metal that had trapped its head and shoulders. Clark found himself directly in the shark's path as it struggled to free itself, its massive tail striking the cage's rear panel with enough force to bend additional support structures. The shark's jaws snapped repeatedly as it fought against the metal bars, its teeth scraping against steel while its powerful muscles strained against the cage's compromised framework. During the shark's desperate attempts to escape, Clark's leg came into contact with the predator's open jaws as he tried to maneuver away from the thrashing animal. The great white's teeth closed reflexively around his calf, delivering a crushing bite that penetrated his wetsuit and inflicted deep puncture wounds in the muscle tissue. The bite lasted only seconds before the shark finally managed to extract itself from the damaged cage. Still, the brief contact was sufficient to cause significant injury and immediate blood loss that clouded the water within the enclosure. Captain Kruger and his crew reacted immediately to the emergency, activating winch systems to raise the damaged cage while monitoring the injured diver's condition through the intercom system. Clark remained conscious throughout the ascent, though he reported severe pain and visible blood loss that concerned both his fellow divers and the surface support team. The cage reached the surface within 90 seconds of the attack, allowing crew members to extract the injured tourist and begin emergency medical treatment while preparing for immediate evacuation to shore. Medical treatment began aboard the dive boat as crew members applied pressure bandages to Clark's wounds and administered pain medication during the high-speed transit back to Gansby Harbor. The puncture wounds, while not immediately life-threatening, required professional medical attention to prevent infection and address potential damage to muscle tissue and blood vessels. Emergency medical personnel were already waiting at the harbor when the boat arrived, having been alerted by Captain Kruger's radio calls during the return journey. Surgeons at a private medical facility in Hermanus spent over 2 hours cleaning and treating Clark's wounds, which included multiple deep puncture marks and tissue damage consistent with great white shark dentition patterns. While Clark avoided permanent disability, the injuries required several weeks of recovery time and extensive antibiotic treatment to prevent infection from marine bacteria. The incident prompted a comprehensive review of cage diving safety protocols and equipment maintenance procedures, with a particular focus on the structural integrity of steel cages subjected to repeated impacts from large predatory sharks. The attack generated significant media attention and renewed debates about the safety of commercial shark diving operations. However, marine biologists emphasized that such incidents remained extremely rare, given the thousands of cage dives conducted annually without incident. Clark eventually recovered from his injuries, but reported that the experience had fundamentally changed his relationship with marine wildlife, replacing his romantic notions about shark encounters with a profound respect for the unpredictable nature of apex predators in their natural environment. The waters surrounding Pearl Harbor on the island of Oahu, Hawaii, carried decades of maritime history beneath their deceptively calm surface. In 2018, the area continued to serve as an active naval training ground, where submarines conducted routine exercises and divers performed regular maintenance operations. Lieutenant Jordan Hayes had served as a Navy diver for 8 years, completing over 300 underwater missions in locations ranging from the frigid waters of Alaska to the tropical seas of the Pacific. The 31-year-old from Oregon had earned commendations for his work in ship hull inspections, underwater welding, and equipment recovery operations. His expertise in deep-water salvage had made him an essential member of the Pacific Fleet's diving team, and he approached each mission with the methodical precision that had kept him safe throughout his military career. On September 14, 2018, Hayes received orders to retrieve sensitive sonar equipment from a decommissioned submarine that had been deliberately sunk 3 miles southwest of Pearl Harbor as part of a training exercise. The vessel, a retired nuclear submarine, rested at a depth of 85 feet on the sandy bottom, its hull providing shelter for various marine species that had quickly colonized the artificial reef. Intelligence reports indicated that several pieces of classified sonar buoys remained attached to the submarine's exterior, and Hayes's mission involved carefully removing these devices without damaging their internal components. The morning dive began routinely, with Hayes descending through crystal-clear water that offered visibility extending nearly 60 feet in all directions. His dive partner, Petty Officer Marcus Chen, remained stationed at the 30-foot mark to serve as a safety observer and maintain communication with the surface support vessel. Hayes carried standard Navy diving equipment, including a full-face mask with integrated communications, dual air supplies, and a complete toolkit for the equipment removal operation. Upon reaching the submarine's hull, Hayes immediately noticed the abundance of marine life that had taken up residence around the wreckage. Schools of tropical fish darted between the vessel's conning tower and periscope housing, while larger species, including barracuda and reef sharks, maintained a respectful distance from the diving operation. The sonar buoys were located along the submarine's port side, partially buried under accumulated sand and coral growth that had developed over the 18 months since the vessel's sinking. Hayes began the delicate process of extracting the first sonar device, using precision tools to cut through the securing cables without triggering any internal damage. The work required intense concentration as he maneuvered around protruding metal structures and navigated through confined spaces between the hull and the accumulated debris. His movements generated subtle vibrations that traveled through the water column, creating the type of low-frequency signals that predatory sharks often associated with distressed prey animals. The 12-foot tiger shark emerged from the submarine's interior without warning, having likely been resting within the vessel's spacious torpedo room before being disturbed by Hayes's activities. Tiger sharks, renowned for their opportunistic hunting behavior and powerful bite force, frequently investigate unfamiliar sounds and movements within their territory. This particular specimen displayed the characteristic dark stripes across its robust body and the broad, flattened head that gave these sharks their distinctive appearance and formidable reputation. Hayes first became aware of the shark's presence when he felt a sudden crushing pressure on his left forearm. The tiger shark had approached from his blind spot and clamped its massive jaws around his diving equipment and arm, apparently mistaking the combination of his wetsuit tools and movement patterns for a large, wounded fish. The shark's teeth, designed for cutting through turtle shells and bones, penetrated his neoprene suit and bit deep into the muscle and bone of his forearm. Trapped within the shark's grip and unable to reach his diving knife with his free hand, Hayes found himself in a desperate struggle for survival. The shark's bite force, estimated at over 400 pounds per square inch, had fractured bones in his arm and severed several tendons, causing excruciating pain and immediate loss of function. Blood began streaming from the wounds, creating a red cloud in the water that would likely attract additional predators within minutes. Drawing on his military training and survival instincts, Hayes began striking the shark's snout and gill slits with his free hand, targeting the sensitive areas that marine biologists had identified as effective deterrents during shark attacks. His blows, hampered by the water's resistance and his awkward position, initially seemed to have little effect on the powerful predator. However, after nearly 30 seconds of sustained attacks, the tiger shark finally released its grip and retreated toward the submarine's interior. Hayes immediately activated his emergency ascent procedures, inflating his buoyancy compensator and beginning a rapid but controlled rise to the surface. Petty Officer Chen, who had observed the attack from his position above, descended quickly to assist with the emergency ascent, while simultaneously alerting the surface support team. The ascent, which normally would have required several decompression stops, was completed in under 3 minutes due to the medical emergency. The surface support crew had already prepared emergency medical equipment by the time Hayes reached the boat, and they immediately began treating his severe injuries while racing toward the nearest naval medical facility. Military medics applied pressure bandages and administered pain medication during the high-speed transit to an Army medical center, where orthopedic surgeons worked to repair the extensive damage to Hayes's arm. The surgical team spent over 4 hours reconstructing Hayes's forearm, repairing fractured bones, reattaching severed tendons, and addressing nerve damage that would require months of physical therapy. While Hayes ultimately retained full use of his arm, the incident prompted a comprehensive review of Navy diving procedures in areas known to harbor large predatory sharks, including mandatory sonar sweeps before diving operations and revised safety protocols for working near underwater structures that could shelter dangerous marine life. It was a gray morning in November 2019, and the USS Porter, a sleek guided missile destroyer, floated just off the coast of Guam, its massive steel hull cutting silently through the calm, warm Pacific waters. The ship was scheduled for a routine hull inspection, a necessary operation to ensure the integrity of its structure after weeks at sea. Chief Petty Officer Daniel Brooks, a Navy diver with over 12 years of underwater experience, was tasked with the inspection. At 38 years old, Daniel was a seasoned professional, known among his peers for his steady nerves and precise work under pressure. Despite his extensive training and countless dives, the ocean always held an element of unpredictable danger, a fact that became painfully clear during the dive that morning. Daniel suited up in the bulky diving gear, his wetsuit, helmet, and air tanks adding significant weight. But he moved with practiced ease. The water's temperature was surprisingly cool beneath the tropical sun, a sharp contrast to the air above. He lowered himself carefully from the side of the ship into the water, adjusting his buoyancy as he descended along the massive keel. The ocean below was murky and thick with drifting silt, stirred up by the ship's movements and the activity of marine life. Visibility was poor, limited to the narrow cone of light cast by Daniel's helmet flashlight. Shadows clung to every crevice of the ship's hull, and the faint hum of his hydraulic tools cut through the stillness. As Daniel worked methodically inspecting seams and plates for damage, the vibrations from his tools sent ripples through the water. These faint disturbances did not go unnoticed. From the murky depths, a tiger shark emerged, drawn by the unusual sounds and movements. The predator was an impressive specimen, measuring a full 14 feet from its blunt snout to the powerful tail. Its mottled skin blended seamlessly with the shadowed seabed, camouflaging it perfectly in the low light. Tiger sharks were known throughout the Pacific as aggressive and opportunistic hunters, feared for their unpredictable behavior and crushing bite. The shark circled silently, its dark eyes fixed on Daniel, who remained unaware of the approaching danger. The predator's movements were slow but purposeful, each sweep of its tail propelling it closer through the silt-clouded water. Then in an instant it struck. With terrifying speed, the shark lunged, its massive jaws clamping down on Daniel's left leg just above the knee. The force was like being crushed in a steel vise, teeth piercing through wet suit and flesh, sinking deep into muscle and bone. Daniel was pinned against the ship's hull, the impact sending a shockwave of pain racing through his body. The cold water churned red with blood, swirling around him in thick clouds that blurred his vision. Pain blinded Daniel, but his training overrode the instinct to panic. His mind raced as he realized reaching for his sidearm was impossible. The shark's grip held him fast and tight. Instead, his hand found the pry bar secured to his belt, a tool meant for leverage, but now his only weapon. With trembling determination, he plunged the metal bar deep into the shark's gills, targeting the soft, sensitive tissue beneath the armored scales. The shark thrashed violently, twisting its massive body in an attempt to dislodge him, but Daniel held firm. With each strike of the pry bar into the gill slits, the shark recoiled, releasing its crushing bite on the third blow. It snapped its powerful jaws shut, snarled, then twisted away from Daniel's leg, retreating into the shadows with a flick of its tail. The water was thick with blood, a red ribbon trailing behind Daniel as he kicked upward. His movements were slow and labored, pain burning through his leg with every motion. But his survival instinct pushed him toward the ascent line tethered to the ship. Above, the dive team watched anxiously, their eyes tracking the spreading crimson in the water. Shouts and commands echoed over the surface as they scrambled to haul him aboard. When Daniel finally broke the water's surface, the pain was overwhelming, but relief washed over him as he was pulled onto the deck. Medics rushed to his side, immediately assessing the deep wounds, puncture marks from razor-sharp teeth, torn muscles, and crushed bones. The damage was severe, but Daniel's swift actions had undoubtedly saved his life. In the sterile emergency room ashore, doctors fought to repair the carnage. Surgeons meticulously stitched muscles and nerves, cleaned away debris, and stabilized broken bone fragments. Over the following days, Daniel endured grueling treatments and endless physical therapy sessions, each moment a battle between pain and hope. His leg would never be quite the same, and the road to recovery was long and uncertain, but his will to live and return to the water remained unbroken. The attack sent shockwaves through the Navy and diving communities. Experts debated the circumstances, concluding that the shark had likely been provoked by the vibrations from Daniel's hydraulic tools, which mimicked the signals of distressed prey or injured animals. The predator's response was swift and defensive, not a premeditated hunt, but a reaction to a perceived threat in its territory. Daniel's story became a sobering reminder that even the most routine operations in the ocean's depths held inherent dangers. The Pacific waters surrounding Guam, a vital strategic region, were home not only to military vessels, but also to powerful predators that ruled beneath the waves. Man and nature existed side by side in a precarious balance, one that could shift in an instant. In the months that followed, Daniel's courage inspired many. He spoke rarely but with quiet resolve about the attack, emphasizing respect for the ocean and its creatures, even those that could bring harm. The Navy implemented additional safety protocols for underwater operations, increasing vigilance and improving communication between surface teams and divers. For Daniel, the memory of the tiger shark's crushing jaws and the cold, shadowed hull beneath the waves lingered vividly. Each day of his recovery was a testament to survival and human endurance in the face of nature's raw power. The ocean, vast and mysterious, remained a place of awe and danger, where every dive was a journey into an unknown world. Though the scar on his leg marked the day he faced death beneath the sea, Daniel Brooks carried with him a story of resilience, bravery, and respect. A story told among sailors and divers who understood the fragile line between life and loss beneath the water's surface. On June 17, 2025, the coast near Gansbai, South Africa, glowed under the afternoon sun. The waves moved gently, but the deeper water beyond the shore hid something far less peaceful. It was a special day for Roman Kavarin and Nadia Volkova, an engaged couple from Russia. Roman was a filmmaker known for capturing real moments in dangerous places. Nadia, a marine biologist, spent her life studying the movement and behavior of ocean creatures. Together, they traveled to explore the unknown and share their love of the wild through their work. This trip to South Africa was more than just a vacation. It was part of a project that mixed adventure and science. They had chosen a new kind of cage dive, one made of reinforced glass instead of metal bars. The capsule was designed to give full views in every direction without any blocked angles. It was promoted as a luxury dive experience with high-end equipment and clear visibility, perfect for both filming and research. The couple boarded the boat early that morning. Their dive had been booked with a private company offering premium shark encounters. The capsule was lowered into the sea, attached to a strong cable system. The glass walls were thick, and the crew explained how the structure was sealed to protect the people inside while still offering close views of great white sharks. Once inside, Roman held the camera while Nadia pointed out fish movements through the wide panels. The light from above filtered through the surface, casting long shadows in the blue. Then, a shape appeared. A 17-foot great white shark approached slowly, its body cutting through the water with power and silence. It circled once, then twice. Without warning, the shark swam straight into the capsule. The impact sent a deep vibration through the structure. Roman and Nadia looked around as the shark backed away and then charged again, this time with more force. The seal along the front panel began to strain. Cracks spread across the glass. Another hit followed. A loud sound echoed through the water, and then the front panel gave out. Seawater rushed into the capsule with great pressure, pushing both Roman and Nadia outward into the open sea. Bubbles filled the space, and the camera slipped from Roman's grip. The shark returned fast. Its teeth slashed across Nadia's torso, causing deep wounds. Roman kicked hard as the shark clamped down on his right leg. Flesh tore away near his calf. Blood spread around them, clouding the water. Above, the crew saw the broken capsule and sounded the alarm. More sharks were now visible in the distance. The team scrambled to act. Ropes were dropped, and one diver prepared to enter. Roman and Nadia floated in the red water, injured and surrounded. The capsule had failed, and time was running out. Roman drifted beside Nadia as the sea around them grew darker with blood. The pressure of the water, the pain in their bodies, and the fear in their minds created a moment neither could fully process. The great white moved nearby but slowed its pace, circling with caution as noise came from above. A crew member dropped a rope while others used poles to push back the approaching threat. A rescue diver entered the water with quick movements. He reached Nadia first, pulling her upward by the strap of her gear. Her wounds were deep and she was losing strength fast. A second diver arrived and swam toward Roman, who had lost most of the muscle below his knee. His body was cold and pale, but his arms still moved. Together, the divers brought them to the surface and lifted them onto the edge of the boat. Medical supplies were opened immediately. Bandages were pressed over torn skin. One crew member used clean towels to stop more fluid from escaping. Oxygen was given through a small tank. The dive team moved fast but stayed calm, knowing how important each second was. As the boat turned back toward land, the injured couple lay side by side, motionless but alive. At the harbor, emergency workers waited with stretchers. Nadia was taken to a trauma center. Her chest and arms had long cuts, but the organs had not been damaged. Roman was brought to the nearest surgery unit. His lower leg had been crushed, but doctors believed it could be saved with quick action. Blood transfusions began right away, and specialists worked for hours to clean and close every wound. News of the failed capsule spread quickly. Videos from the crew and nearby divers were shared across the internet. The clear panel had cracked along a weak point, and many experts blamed the design. Safety groups asked for changes in rules around wildlife tourism. Some called for stronger testing of dive equipment before allowing public use. Others said sharks should not be approached for entertainment. The dive company released a statement and stopped all bookings. Their engineers joined an investigation to understand why the seal had broken. Officials from the local Marine Board promised to review laws and speak with other companies offering similar services. No other injuries had been reported that season, but the public began to ask harder questions. Roman stayed in the hospital for 3 weeks. He later needed support to walk, but remained thankful to the team who acted fast. Nadia recovered faster and returned to her work with quiet focus. She no longer joined deep dives, but continued to study sharks through data and long-range cameras. The experience changed their lives. What began as a dream trip turned into a warning for others. The ocean remained powerful and unpredictable. Even the best plans could fall apart in seconds. They never returned to Gansbai, but the memory of that day would stay with them forever. July 16, 2025. The waters off the coast of Maui, Hawaii were still and dark under a moonless sky. The waves moved slowly as a small research boat floated near the edge of a reef system known for glowing plankton and large sea life. Elena Torres, a 38-year-old marine biologist, stood on the deck preparing for a deep-water observation. She had spent her life studying the ocean and had worked across several regions, from shallow lagoons to open trenches. Elena held a doctorate in marine ecology and had published several respected papers on light-producing organisms. Her research focused on small creatures that could light up the water at night. She believed these tiny life forms could reveal important clues about climate change in reef zones. Her team followed her everywhere she went, trusting her experience and her steady approach to every challenge. This night dive was part of a long-term study funded by a university research program. The area they had chosen was known for clear nighttime visibility and high activity below the surface. Elena had led many trips here before without incident. Her crew remained on the surface to take readings and monitor sonar activity, while she planned to collect samples near the reef wall. She carried a powerful dive light, a collection pouch, and a small cutting tool clipped to her vest. As she dropped beneath the waves, the world turned quiet and dim. The dive light lit up the coral and drifting particles, making the water glow. Schools of small fish swam past her, and faint blue lights flickered among the reef. She swam slowly, careful not to disturb the scene. Near the bottom, she spotted a coral ledge with a small group of glowing organisms. She moved toward it, aiming her light across the surface to select a spot for sampling. Without warning, a tiger shark nearly the length of a small car came out from behind the overhang. It moved quickly, its wide body tense and alert. The strong beam from the light and her movements may have drawn its attention. The shark turned sharply and lunged forward. Its jaws clamped down on her midsection with force. The bite tore through gear and fabric. A major blood vessel was hit, and a cloud of red spread through the water. Elena dropped her tools and tried to push away, but the damage was already severe. Her light fell to the ocean floor, flickering weakly as she floated back. The team above saw the sudden change in motion through their monitors. A rescue diver jumped in without delay and reached her in moments. Elena was unresponsive, her body drifting as the water around her grew darker. They began lifting her toward the surface, but the night was far from over. The boat was still miles from shore, and time was slipping away fast. The diver brought Elena to the surface as fast as possible. Her vest was torn, and deep wounds stretched across her body. The crew on board pulled her in and placed her on the deck. One member pressed both hands over the worst area while another prepared emergency gear. The boat rocked gently, but everyone moved quickly and with care. The bleeding was heavy, Her skin had turned pale and her breathing was faint. A team member started chest compressions while another used a small oxygen supply to support airflow. A call for emergency help went out across the radio, but the location of the boat was far from the harbor. Even with a fast response, it would take time for the rescue to arrive. They worked in silence for what felt like hours. Bandages were quickly soaked through, and the medical kit was soon emptied. The boat veered sharply toward land, though the lights of the island still shimmered far off. No one spoke beyond what was necessary. Every moment focused on keeping her alive. By the time they reached the dock nearly an hour later, an ambulance was already waiting. Paramedics moved swiftly, lifting her into the vehicle and rushing her to the nearest care facility. But it was too late. Elena had succumbed to her injuries on the way. Despite all their efforts, she never made it to shore alive. The news reached the scientific community by morning. Her name was well known in research circles, and the loss was deeply felt. She had mentored students, led important studies, and brought attention to fragile marine life. Many of her colleagues remembered her focus, kindness, and courage. Statements were shared from institutions and conservation groups across the region. The dive program was paused for investigation. Officials reviewed the dive plan, equipment, and reports from the team. The area where the bite happened had a known history of large animal presence. Experts explained that the shark may have reacted to sudden movement, light patterns, or vibrations near its resting space. They believed it was likely a defensive action, not an attack for food. Her equipment was collected and reviewed. The dive lights, collection bag, and recording tools were brought in for analysis. A report was made to help improve future safety rules for night work in open ocean environments. Friends and family gathered for a quiet memorial near the shore. Photos from past trips were placed in a row beside flowers. People shared memories of her work, her travel, and the way she always stayed calm even in deep water. The reef was later marked as a high alert zone for after-dark diving. Signs were added to guide new teams, and stricter rules were put in place. Researchers began creating better lights and tracking gear for safer use during future missions. Elena's final dive became a lesson across the field. The sea, even in study, demanded respect. Her work would continue in the hands of others, but her absence was clear. The ocean had taken one of its most careful explorers. On July 12, 2025, thick morning fog rolled across Cape Cod Bay, spreading a silent blanket over the water. Gwen Harper, a 52-year-old sailor, moved steadily across the calm surface in her small boat. With over 2 decades of experience at sea, Gwen had faced rough storms, strong currents, and long weeks away from shore. Originally from Portland, Maine, she grew up learning to sail with her father, who taught her to respect the ocean, but never fear it. She spent most of her adult life in maritime work, guiding charter vessels and volunteering in coastal cleanup missions. Over time, she built a quiet but well-earned reputation in local sailing circles as someone dependable and calm under pressure. That summer, she had taken time off to sail alone along the Massachusetts coastline, hoping to enjoy peaceful mornings with no schedules to follow. She chose Cape Cod Bay for its beauty and clear waters. The season was known for the arrival of seals along the shore, and she planned to fish for cod while watching the wildlife from a safe distance. Gwen often avoided crowded areas, preferring quiet anchor spots where she could spend hours reading, fishing, or making repairs to her boat. That morning, the fog was heavy, and the air was cool. Gwen moved slowly, using her navigation tools to stay clear of rocks and sandbars. She planned to drop a line and try her luck with the early fish feeding near the edge of the reef. As she bent forward to prepare her rod, a violent crash shook the entire boat. Without warning, a massive shape burst through the water. A great white shark slammed into the side of the vessel with such force that the hull cracked near the middle. Gwen lost her footing and was thrown overboard into the cold sea. The splash echoed in the quiet fog as the boat rocked hard and began drifting away. The shark circled once. Gwen, now in the water, felt a sudden sharp pain along her side. The animal's powerful jaws had scraped her ribs but failed to bite deep. Her heavy coat and life jacket likely slowed the force. She kicked with all her strength, trying to stay upright and alert in the thick mist. The boat, damaged but not sinking, floated just a few feet away, its engine still humming softly. The water around her was cold and her limbs began to weaken. She used controlled breathing, a skill she learned in years of survival courses, to stay calm. Her training helped her fight panic. With each stroke, she pushed toward the vessel. As she reached the side, she saw broken fiberglass and the cracked metal rail. But she also saw the ladder she had installed last spring, still hanging over the edge. And with her strength fading and the shark still somewhere beneath her, Gwen made one final effort to pull herself up and reach safety. Gwen grabbed the edge of the ladder and used every bit of strength to climb. Her hands slipped and pain ran through her ribs, but she did not stop. One foot after the other, she pulled herself over the edge and dropped onto the deck. Her wet clothes clung to her body as she lay on her side, breathing hard, her heart pounding from shock. The cold air hit her skin, and her fingers trembled as she reached for the emergency radio. The boat had taken damage. The broken section near the middle had a deep crack, where water slowly entered the lower compartment. One of the rails hung loose, and part of the floor near the edge was soaked. Gwen checked the motor. It was still running but made an odd sound. She kept the engine on low and turned the boat toward the nearest marina using the compass and map on board. She also sent out a distress signal with her exact location. The fog remained thick and visibility was poor. Gwen knew she needed to stay calm and alert. She kept pressure on the shallow wound near her ribs using part of a dry towel. It was not deep, but the area was bruised and swollen. She felt sore all over, but her main worry was keeping the boat moving and staying awake. About 40 minutes later, she saw the faint light of another vessel through the mist. A local fishing crew had received her signal and rushed over. They helped guide her to safety, staying beside her boat as she made the final stretch back to the harbor. Once docked, paramedics checked her condition. She had minor cuts, early signs of cold stress, and needed rest, but she was stable. News of the incident spread fast. Other sailors nearby shared similar stories of shark activity during the past week. Experts believed the heavy fog, paired with the seasonal movement of seals, made the shark more active. The sudden sound of movement in the still water may have triggered the strong response. Gwen had followed all known safety rules, but the situation showed that even the most careful person could face danger when nature changed its rhythm. Back at home, Gwen took time to recover. She received care for her injury and worked with the boat repair team to fix the broken sections. Her boat had saved her life, but the damage reminded her how fragile safety could be. The event sparked new talks among local sailors and scientists. Some called for updated alerts during fog-heavy mornings, especially in areas with known shark patterns. Others pushed for clearer safety signs and better emergency tools for solo travelers. Gwen never stopped sailing, but she changed how she prepared. She added stronger lights, extra safety gear, and always shared her route before setting out. Her experience became a reminder to others that even quiet mornings on the water can hold unexpected risk. The waters off Gansbaai, South Africa, had gained international acclaim as a great white shark diving mecca. On June 4, 2025, this small fishing town, situated roughly 2 hours east of Cape Town, sat at the edge of what marine researchers called Shark Alley, a narrow channel between Dyer Island and Geyser Rock where the ocean's apex predators gathered in impressive numbers. The area's unique geography created perfect hunting conditions, with Cape fur seals congregating on nearby islands, drawing great whites from across the southern Atlantic. For decades, tour operators had capitalized on this natural phenomenon, offering tourists the chance to observe these magnificent creatures from the relative safety of reinforced steel cages. Elena Marchetti, a spirited 10-year-old from Milan, had convinced her mother, Francesca, to book this once-in-a-lifetime adventure during their trip to South Africa. The girl possessed an insatiable curiosity about marine life that had begun with nature documentaries and grown into a genuine passion. Francesca, initially hesitant about exposing her young daughter to such an intense experience, eventually agreed after extensive research into the tour company's safety record. The operators assured them that their cages had undergone rigorous testing and had never experienced a serious breach in 15 years of operation. The morning expedition began at dawn, with their vessel, the Sea Stalker, cutting through choppy waters toward the prime viewing area. Captain Willem Botha, a weathered local with 3 decades of shark diving experience, briefed the 12 passengers on safety protocols while his crew prepared the diving equipment. The cage itself measured roughly 10 feet long, 6 feet wide, and 8 feet deep, constructed from heavy-gauge steel bars with gaps wide enough to allow clear photography, but supposedly too narrow for even the largest great white to penetrate. Elena bounced with excitement as she and her mother donned their wetsuits, masks, and snorkels. The water temperature hovered around 16 degrees Celsius, requiring thick neoprene protection against the Atlantic chill. Francesca noticed her daughter's hands trembling slightly, although it was unclear whether the tremor was due to cold or anticipation. The crew lowered the cage into the dark water, its bright yellow flotation devices keeping it stable at the surface while allowing occupants to submerge their heads for underwater viewing. The mother and daughter entered the cage together, joining two other tourists who were already positioned inside. The steel structure felt solid beneath their feet, the metal bars reassuringly thick. Almost immediately, the first great white appeared, its massive form materializing from the blue-green depths like a living torpedo. Elena gasped through her snorkel as the 14-foot female glided past, her dark eyes seeming to assess the strange contraption and its human occupants. The shark's initial passes were cautious, almost elegant in their measured approach. She circled the cage at a respectful distance, occasionally drawing closer to investigate the scent trail left by the crew's chum bucket. Elena pressed her face against the bars, marveling at the creature's prehistoric grace and raw power. Francesca remained close to her daughter, one protective arm draped across the girl's shoulders while she too watched in fascination. The situation changed dramatically when a second, much larger great white arrived on the scene. This massive male, estimated at nearly 18 feet in length, displayed far more aggressive behavior than his smaller companion. He approached the cage directly, his scarred snout bumping against the steel bars with surprising force. The impact sent vibrations through the entire structure, making the occupants grab onto the framework for stability. What happened next would haunt Elena and Francesca for years to come. The enormous shark, apparently irritated by the cage's presence, or perhaps attracted by the scent of the occupants themselves, launched itself at the barrier with unprecedented violence. His massive head struck the cage's corner joint with the force of a battering ram, targeting a section where recent maintenance had left the welds slightly weakened. The sickening sound of bending metal filled the water as several bars separated from their mounting points. Elena watched in horror as the predator's massive head forced its way through the newly created gap, its powerful jaws snapping mere inches from her face. Francesca screamed into her regulator, the sound muffled but filled with maternal terror as she tried to pull her daughter away from the encroaching threat. The shark's movements became increasingly frantic as he realized his predicament. His massive body was too large to fit fully into the cage, but his head and powerful front fins had breached the barrier. In his struggle to free himself, his jaws clamped down on Elena's extended forearm, the rows of razor-sharp teeth penetrating her wetsuit and flesh with devastating efficiency. Pain exploded through Elena's body as the shark's bite compressed her arm, the pressure threatening to snap bones. Blood began clouding the water around them, the metallic scent likely driving the predator into an even greater frenzy. Francesca abandoned all caution, using her bare hands to strike at the shark's snout and gills while screaming for help from the surface crew. The struggle lasted what felt like hours but spanned less than 2 minutes. Elena, despite her youth and terror, managed to remain conscious and even attempted to push against the shark's head with her free hand. The great white thrashed violently, his powerful tail creating turbulence that rocked the damaged cage dangerously. Finally, whether from confusion, pain, or simple frustration, the massive predator released his grip and backed away from the cage. He disappeared into the depths as suddenly as he had appeared, leaving behind a scene of chaos and blood. Elena floated semi-conscious in her mother's arms, her wetsuit torn and her arm bearing deep puncture wounds that would require immediate medical attention. The crew hauled the damaged cage to the surface with unprecedented speed, their years of emergency training finally put to the ultimate test. Elena was rushed aboard the vessel, where the ship's first aid officer worked to control the bleeding while Captain Botha radioed for immediate helicopter evacuation. Elena survived her ordeal, though she required multiple surgeries to repair the damage to her arm and hand. The incident garnered international attention, leading to enhanced safety regulations for shark cage diving operations throughout South Africa. The experience, while traumatic, ultimately strengthened Elena's fascination with marine life, though she would never again venture into their domain without proper respect for their lethal capabilities. The Zambezi River Delta system along Mozambique's coastline had gained international recognition among adventure kayakers by 2012, offering a unique combination of challenging waters and spectacular wildlife viewing opportunities. Lucas Brandão, a 34-year-old adventure photographer from Maputo, had spent 3 days documenting the delta's wildlife when he decided to explore the river mouth's more challenging waters. His lightweight sea kayak, a custom-built fiberglass model designed for extended expeditions, had served him well during previous assignments in similarly demanding environments. Lucas possessed extensive experience in whitewater kayaking, and had completed solo expeditions along much of Mozambique's coastline over the past decade. The morning started promisingly, with calm conditions and excellent visibility in the clear water. Lucas had launched his kayak from a secluded beach approximately 2 kilometers upstream from the main river mouth, planning to photograph the area where the Zambezi's muddy waters met the crystal-clear Indian Ocean. His waterproof camera equipment was secured in specially designed dry bags, positioned for quick access while maintaining proper weight distribution in the narrow craft. The tidal conditions were perfect for his planned route, with the outgoing tide creating a moderate current that would assist his downstream progress while leaving enough slack water near the shoreline for detailed photography work. Lucas had timed his departure to coincide with peak wildlife activity when fish populations were most active and predators were likely to be hunting in the shallow areas. As he paddled through the main channel, Lucas noticed unusual disturbances in the water around him. Small fish were breaking the surface in erratic patterns, their panicked movements suggesting the presence of larger predators below. He paused his paddling to observe the phenomenon more closely, reaching for his camera to document what appeared to be a significant feeding event taking place in the deeper water nearby. The bull shark's first appearance was so sudden and violent that Lucas barely had time to register what was happening. The massive predator, estimated at nearly 12 feet in length, exploded upward from the murky depths directly beneath his kayak. Its powerful jaws clamped down on the fiberglass hull with crushing force, the sound of splintering composite material audible above the water's surface. Lucas felt his kayak shudder and begin to list as the shark's teeth penetrated the hull's thin skin. The creature's initial bite had punched several holes through the bottom of the craft, allowing water to pour into the cockpit area. The bull shark thrashed violently, its powerful body creating massive turbulence that threatened to capsize the damaged kayak entirely. Fighting to maintain his balance in the rapidly deteriorating situation, Lucas attempted to use his paddle as a defensive weapon, striking at the shark's head and snout area. The bull shark responded by releasing its grip on the hull and immediately lunging at the paddle itself, its jaws snapping shut on the carbon fiber blade with enough force to sever it completely. The kayak's structural integrity was failing rapidly under the combined assault of the shark's attacks and the increasing water intrusion. Lucas could feel the craft beginning to break apart beneath him as the fiberglass hull cracked along stress lines that the initial bite had compromised. The shark circled aggressively, its dorsal fin cutting through the surface as it prepared for another attack. With his kayak sinking and his primary means of defense destroyed, Lucas made the desperate decision to abandon the craft and attempt to swim toward the nearest shoreline. The bull shark immediately detected his movement in the water and moved to intercept, its powerful tail driving it forward with frightening speed and agility. Lucas's entry into the water triggered an immediate escalation in the shark's aggressive behavior. The predator approached within mere feet of the struggling swimmer, its massive head breaking the surface as it investigated this new development. Lucas could see the creature's dark eyes and rows of triangular teeth as it passed close enough to graze his arm with its rough skin. The bull shark's next pass was more direct, its jaws snapping shut inches from Lucas's torso as he kicked frantically to avoid the attack. The near miss left several scratches along his ribs where the shark's teeth had made contact with his wetsuit, though fortunately without penetrating the neoprene material deeply enough to cause serious injury. Adrenaline and desperation drove Lucas to employ every survival technique he could remember from his extensive outdoor training. He splashed aggressively with his arms while shouting at the top of his lungs, hoping to confuse or intimidate the predator. The technique seemed to have some effect, as the bull shark hesitated momentarily before its next approach. Using this brief respite, Lucas began swimming toward shore with powerful strokes, maintaining the aggressive splashing and vocalizations that seemed to keep the shark at bay. The predator continued to circle at a slightly greater distance, apparently weighing the potential risks and rewards of continuing its attack against this unusually combative prey. The swim to safety covered approximately 150 meters through increasingly shallow water, with the bull shark maintaining its pursuit until Lucas reached depths of less than 1 meter. Even then, the predator continued patrolling the deeper water nearby, its presence visible as it waited for any opportunity to resume its attack. Lucas finally reached the muddy shoreline, his body shaking from a combination of physical exhaustion and psychological trauma. His destroyed kayak had completely sunk by this point, taking with it several $1,000s worth of camera equipment and camping gear. The encounter had left him with numerous scrapes and minor cuts, though no serious injuries that required immediate medical attention. The incident was reported to local authorities, who subsequently issued warnings to other water sports enthusiasts about the increased activity of bull sharks in the area. Lucas's experience became part of ongoing research into human-shark interactions in Mozambique's coastal waters, contributing valuable data about bull shark behavior in estuarine environments. Despite the traumatic nature of his encounter, Lucas eventually returned to kayaking, although he never again ventured into known bull shark habitat without proper safety equipment and communication. Coastal waters off Queensland's Sunshine Coast were already a favorite among water sports enthusiasts by 2008, known for their perfect surfing and wakeboarding conditions. This particular stretch of Australia's eastern seaboard featured consistent wind patterns, relatively protected waters behind barrier islands, and a thriving marine ecosystem that supported a diverse range of recreational activities. Sarah Blackwood, a 26-year-old professional water skiing instructor from Brisbane, had traveled to the area for a weekend training camp with several of her advanced students. Her reputation in competitive water skiing circles was well established, having won multiple state championships and represented Australia in international competitions. Sarah's expertise in high-speed water sports was matched by her thorough understanding of marine safety protocols, making her a sought-after instructor for serious athletes. The training session was scheduled to focus on advanced techniques for tournament-level competition, including high-speed turns, jump approaches, and complex wake maneuvering. Sarah had selected this particular location for its consistent water conditions and minimal boat traffic, factors that were crucial for maintaining the precision required in competitive water skiing. Her support boat, operated by experienced driver Marcus Chen, was equipped with specialized tournament rigging and safety equipment. The morning's training program had proceeded smoothly, with Sarah demonstrating various techniques while her students observed from the boat. Water conditions were excellent, with minimal wind chop and visibility extending well beyond normal safety requirements. The planned exercises were designed to push performance boundaries while maintaining strict safety margins, a balance that required constant attention to environmental conditions and equipment status. Sarah was in the middle of an advanced slalom run, carving aggressive turns at speeds approaching 60 kilometers per hour, when the tiger shark struck without warning. The massive predator, later estimated at nearly 15 feet in length, had been attracted by the boat's wake and the unusual disturbance patterns created by Sarah's high-speed maneuvering. The shark's initial attack targeted the wakeboard's tow rope rather than Sarah herself, possibly mistaking the taut line for a large fish or marine mammal. The creature's powerful jaws clamped down on the rope approximately 10 meters behind Sarah's position, instantly creating massive tension that jerked her off balance and sent her tumbling into the churning water at high speed. Sarah's impact with the water was violent and disorienting, her body skipping across the surface before plunging beneath the waves near a rocky outcropping that marked the channel's edge. The jagged limestone formations, worn smooth by centuries of wave action, presented immediate danger as Sarah's momentum carried her toward the submerged hazards. Her left arm struck the rocky bottom with considerable force, the sharp coral formations and limestone edges shredding her wetsuit and scoring deep gashes along her forearm and shoulder. Blood immediately began seeping from multiple lacerations, creating a scent trail that would inevitably attract additional marine predators to the area. The tiger shark, having destroyed the tow rope, began circling the area where Sarah had disappeared beneath the surface. Its behavior indicated heightened interest in the blood and disturbance patterns, with the predator's distinctive swimming pattern becoming more focused and deliberate as it homed in on the new stimulus. Sarah surfaced approximately 20 meters from the impact site, gasping for air while simultaneously trying to assess her injuries and locate the support boat. Blood was streaming from her wounded arm, mixing with the salt water and creating visible trails that spread rapidly in the current. Her immediate priority was reaching safety before the shark could locate and investigate her position. Marcus Chen had immediately throttled down the boat's engines and begun maneuvering toward Sarah's position, but the process required careful navigation to avoid the rocky areas where she had landed. The rescue operation was complicated by the need to maintain a sufficient distance from the submerged hazards while positioning the boat for a safe recovery. The tiger shark's next approach was more direct and purposeful, its massive form visible beneath the surface as it investigated the source of the blood trail. Sarah caught sight of the predator's distinctive pattern just meters away. She began employing aggressive defensive tactics, splashing violently with her uninjured arm while shouting to attract the attention of the support boat. Her defensive display seemed to confuse the shark temporarily, causing it to hesitate approximately 5 meters from her position. The predator circled once more, apparently assessing this unusual prey response, before making a more committed approach that brought it within striking distance. Sarah's second encounter with the tiger shark was far more direct than the first. The massive predator lunged forward with explosive power, its jaws snapping shut mere centimeters from her torso as she desperately twisted away from the attack. The shark's rough skin made contact with her injured arm, adding to the existing abrasions while demonstrating the creature's impressive size and power. The near miss galvanized Sarah's survival instincts, driving her to swim with desperate intensity toward the approaching rescue boat. Every stroke sent fresh waves of pain through her injured arm, but adrenaline and fear provided the motivation needed to maintain her pace despite the growing fatigue and blood loss. Marcus successfully maneuvered the boat into position for rescue, cutting the engines to avoid propeller injury while extending a boarding ladder toward Sarah's position. The tiger shark made one final approach during the recovery process, its dorsal fin visible as it passed within 3 meters of the boat before disappearing into deeper water. Sarah was hauled aboard in a state of near exhaustion, her injuries requiring immediate first aid to control bleeding and prevent shock. The lacerations on her arm were extensive but had avoided major arteries, allowing for successful treatment at the local medical facility, where she received over 40 stitches and a comprehensive course of antibiotics to prevent infection. The incident was thoroughly investigated by marine safety authorities, who determined that the attack was likely triggered by the unusual disturbance patterns created by high-speed water skiing equipment. Sarah's experience contributed to the development of new safety protocols for competitive water sports in areas known to harbor large shark populations. Despite the traumatic nature of her encounter, Sarah eventually returned to competitive water skiing. However, she became a strong advocate for enhanced marine safety education and the use of shark deterrent technology during training activities in areas with known predator populations. The waters off Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, earned their reputation as the graveyard of the Atlantic through centuries of maritime disasters that littered the ocean floor with hundreds of shipwrecks. By 2016, this treacherous stretch of coastline had become a mecca for technical divers seeking to explore some of the most historically significant wrecks in American waters. Marcus Lynn had established himself as one of California's most accomplished technical divers through a decade of exploring deep wrecks along the Pacific coast. The 29-year-old software engineer from San Francisco held advanced certifications in mixed gas diving, underwater navigation, and wreck penetration techniques, which enabled him to explore the interior spaces of sunken vessels safely. His methodical approach to dive planning had earned him respect within the technical diving community, though his friends occasionally questioned his willingness to accept increasingly dangerous challenges. The dare originated during a heated discussion at a dive shop in Hatteras Village, where Lynn had been preparing visiting divers from California for wreck dives. Local dive operator Captain Rex Morrison mentioned that few visiting divers possessed the skills necessary to penetrate the U-85, a German submarine sunk in 1942 that rested in 115 feet of water 28 miles offshore. When Morrison suggested that the wreck's cramped interior spaces and deteriorating structure made solo exploration inadvisable, Lynn immediately accepted the implied challenge. On August 17, 2016, Lynn convinced his regular dive partner, photographer Elena Vasquez, to accompany him on what he described as a routine wreck penetration dive. However, once they reached the U-85's resting place on the sandy bottom, Lynn revealed his intention to explore the submarine's interior alone, using minimal lighting equipment to simulate the methods of early wreck explorers who relied on primitive underwater torches. Vasquez strongly objected, arguing that solo penetration violated basic technical diving safety principles. Despite Vasquez's concerns, Lynn entered the submarine through a large breach in the pressure hull, carrying only a small primary light and a single backup illumination source. The U-85's interior had been transformed over 7 decades into a complex maze of collapsed bulkheads, tangled cables, and accumulated debris, creating numerous entanglement hazards. Marine growth covered every surface, while schools of fish had claimed various compartments as permanent homes. Navigation through the submarine's narrow corridors required Lynn to squeeze through openings barely wider than his body while dragging diving equipment behind him. The limited visibility provided by his single light meant he could only see a few feet ahead, forcing him to rely primarily on touch to navigate around obstacles and maintain his orientation within the wreck. His progress took him past the vessel's galley and crew quarters toward the forward torpedo room. The sand tiger shark that attacked Lynn had likely been using the submarine's interior as a resting place for months, taking advantage of the wreck's protected environment and abundant food sources. Sand tiger sharks, despite their fearsome appearance and protruding teeth, typically displayed docile behavior around human divers and rarely initiated unprovoked attacks. However, the confined space and Lynn's sudden appearance with bright lights had triggered a defensive response. The attack occurred as Lynn maneuvered through a particularly narrow passage between torpedo tubes and collapsed decking. The 8-foot sand tiger shark emerged from the shadows with surprising speed, its jaws clamping down on Lynn's right calf just above his diving fin. The shark's needle-sharp teeth penetrated his wetsuit and punctured multiple areas of muscle tissue, while Lynn struggled to understand what was happening in the confined, dimly lit space. Lynn's immediate reaction was to reach for his diving knife, but his position within the wreck's cramped confines prevented him from accessing the tool strapped to his left leg. The shark maintained its grip as Lynn thrashed against the interior structures, creating a cloud of sediment that reduced visibility to nearly zero. Old fishing nets and debris became entangled around both Lynn and the shark, creating a deadly trap that threatened to prevent escape. The struggle continued for nearly 2 minutes as Lynn fought simultaneously against the shark's grip and growing tangle of debris that threatened to pin him permanently within the submarine's interior. His air consumption increased dramatically due to physical exertion and stress, while blood from his wounds attracted other marine life within the wreck. Finally, through desperate kicks and manipulating his diving tank to strike the shark's head, Lynn convinced the predator to release its hold and retreat deeper into the submarine. Vasquez, monitoring Lynn's progress from outside the wreck, immediately recognized the emergency when she observed debris and blood emerging from the submarine's interior. She entered the breach point and followed Lynn's bubbles and guideline to his location, arriving as he began to escape from the entangled fishing nets. Her wreck penetration experience proved crucial as she helped guide Lynn through the submarine's maze-like interior while monitoring his air supply and physical condition. The ascent required careful decompression stops despite the medical emergency, as rapid ascent from 115 feet could have resulted in potentially fatal decompression sickness. Vasquez maintained close contact throughout the ascent process, monitoring Lynn's breathing and consciousness while preparing to initiate emergency procedures if his condition deteriorated. The controlled ascent took nearly 12 minutes, during which Lynn's bleeding continued and pain levels increased significantly. Emergency medical personnel were standing by at Hatteras Harbor when the dive boat returned, having been alerted by the captain's radio calls during the emergency ascent. Paramedics immediately began treating Lynn's multiple puncture wounds and deep lacerations while preparing him for transport to a trauma center. The wounds required extensive cleaning to remove embedded debris and potential bacteria before surgical repair could begin. Orthopedic surgeons at a medical center spent over 3 hours treating Lynn's injuries, which included muscle tears, tendon damage, and several deep puncture wounds that had narrowly missed major blood vessels. While Lynn eventually recovered full use of his leg after months of physical therapy, the incident effectively ended his interest in solo wreck penetration. It prompted him to become an advocate for conservative safety practices in technical diving. The waters off Gansby, South Africa, had earned their reputation as the great white shark capital of the world long before July 5, 2025. This stretch of the western Cape coastline, where the cold Atlantic meets the warmer Indian Ocean currents, created the perfect hunting ground for apex predators. The area's massive seal colonies on nearby Dyer Island had attracted great whites for centuries, turning these waters into a natural amphitheater of marine drama. Local fishing communities had passed down stories of enormous sharks for generations. Still, it was only in recent decades that thrill seekers and researchers began venturing into these dangerous waters with increasing frequency. Lucas Miller had first encountered the ocean's most feared predator 3 years earlier off the coast of Port Lincoln, Australia. The 28-year-old extreme sports enthusiast from Bavaria had been participating in an unauthorized cage-free dive when a 14-foot great white had attacked him, leaving deep gashes across his shoulder and back. The scars from that encounter served as both a warning and a badge of honor, and rather than deterring him, the attack had only intensified his obsession with these magnificent killing machines. By 2025, Miller had built a modest following on social media, documenting his increasingly dangerous stunts. His YouTube channel featured him base, jumping from alpine peaks, free climbing sheer cliff faces, and swimming with various shark species around the globe. When a documentary production company approached him about filming the ultimate shark encounter, Miller knew exactly what he wanted to accomplish. He would return to the waters where great whites ruled supreme. Still, this time he would attempt something no one had ever successfully documented: swimming alongside a great white shark without any protective equipment, while maintaining proximity for an extended period. The production team had spent weeks coordinating with local boat operators and securing the necessary permits. Captain Hendrik Botha, a weathered Afrikaner who had been running shark diving expeditions for over 2 decades, expressed serious reservations about the planned stunt. He told the crew that in all his years on these waters, he had never seen anyone attempt such a reckless feat. The captain's concerns were echoed by marine biologist Dr. Sarah Chen, who had been brought in as a safety consultant, but found herself increasingly uncomfortable with the production's cavalier attitude toward the inherent dangers. On the morning of July 5th, conditions appeared ideal for the attempt. The sea lay relatively calm under overcast skies, with water visibility extending to nearly 30 feet. The production boat anchored near a known great white hunting ground, roughly 2 miles southeast of Dyer Island. Within minutes of deploying their chum slick, the crew spotted the distinctive triangular dorsal fin of a massive great white circling their vessel. Marine mammal expert Jonas Kellerman estimated the shark's length at approximately 16 feet, making it one of the largest specimens he had ever observed in these waters. Miller suited up in a standard wetsuit, refusing all protective gear except for diving fins and a mask. He carried no shark deterrent devices, no protective cage, and no weapon of any kind. His plan involved entering the water slowly and maintaining calm, controlled movements while the cameras captured every moment of his interaction with the apex predator. The documentary crew positioned themselves both above and below the waterline, with underwater cameraman Yuki Tanaka following Miller's descent while remaining at what everyone hoped would be a safe distance. The initial minutes of the encounter proceeded exactly as Miller had envisioned. The great white approached with the calculated grace that had made these sharks successful hunters for millions of years. Miller floated motionless in the water column, his arms spread wide in a gesture of non-aggression, while the massive predator circled him at a distance of roughly 20 feet. The shark's behavior appeared curious rather than aggressive. For several minutes, the encounter bore a resemblance to the peaceful interactions Miller had experienced with other large marine predators in the past. However, experienced great white shark researchers knew that these sharks could transition from docile to explosive aggression in mere seconds. Dr. Chen later reported that she had observed subtle changes in the shark's body language approximately 30 seconds before the attack occurred. The great white's movements became more rigid and direct, its pectoral fins dropped lower, and its swimming pattern shifted from lazy circles to increasingly tight spirals around Miller's position. The attack happened with the lightning speed that made great whites such effective predators. Without warning, the shark accelerated from its circling pattern and struck Miller with tremendous force, its massive jaws clamping down on his torso just below the ribcage. Underwater cameras captured the horrifying moment as the shark's serrated teeth penetrated the wetsuit and bit deep into Miller's body cavity. Blood immediately clouded the water as Miller thrashed desperately, his hands beating against the shark's snout in a futile attempt to force a release. Captain Botha immediately gunned the boat's engines while crew members threw life preservers and shouted instructions that could not be heard beneath the surface. Tanaka, the underwater cameraman, found himself torn between his professional obligations and basic human survival instincts as he witnessed the attack unfolding just 20 feet away. He continued filming while simultaneously signaling frantically to the surface crew, his camera capturing footage that would later serve as crucial evidence in the investigation. The great white's attack continued for what seemed like an eternity, but according to the timestamps on the recovered footage, it lasted only 43 seconds. Miller's struggles grew weaker as the shark maintained its grip and began the characteristic thrashing motion that great whites use to tear chunks of flesh from their prey. When the shark finally released its hold, Miller's body floated motionless in the rapidly expanding cloud of blood, his wetsuit torn open and his injuries visible even through the murky water. Recovery efforts began immediately, with Captain Botha and 2 crew members diving into the shark-infested waters to retrieve Miller's unconscious form. The great white had disappeared back into the depths, apparently satisfied with its attack, though Dr. Chen noted that the blood in the water would likely attract additional predators within minutes. The rescue team managed to pull Müller aboard their vessel and began emergency first aid procedures, but his injuries were catastrophic and beyond the capabilities of their basic medical supplies. A medical helicopter evacuated Müller to Groot Schuur Hospital in Cape Town, where trauma surgeons worked for over 6 hours, attempting to repair the massive damage to his torso. Despite their efforts, Müller succumbed to his injuries 12 hours after the attack, having never regained consciousness. Marine biologists and safety experts subsequently used the documentary footage to study the behavior and attack patterns of great white sharks. However, the production company faced significant legal challenges from Müller's family regarding the circumstances surrounding his death. The incident sent shockwaves through the extreme sports community and prompted heated debates about the ethics of filming dangerous stunts involving wildlife. Captain Botha retired from shark diving operations shortly after the attack, stating that, in his opinion, some boundaries should never be crossed in humanity's relationship with the ocean's apex predators. On the scorching morning of July 23, 2021, the sun hung high above a remote sandbar in the Bahamas, casting sharp, shimmering light across the crystal-clear turquoise waters. Chloe Martin, a 25-year-old professional fashion model from Miami, stood knee-deep in the shallow water, her sun-kissed skin glowing as she posed for a high-profile magazine photo shoot. Chloe had spent years building her career, her graceful poise and serene expressions capturing the attention of photographers and editors alike. The shoot was supposed to be an idyllic blend of nature's beauty and human elegance, a celebration of summer in one of the world's most breathtaking settings. Beneath the surface, however, the ocean told a different story. A 7-foot lemon shark, sleek and muscular with its characteristic yellowish tint, cruised just beneath the waves. The creature moved with quiet purpose, drawn by the sudden flurry of bait fish fleeing from the commotion on the sandbar. The thrumming sound of camera shutters and the shifting feet of crew members on the shallow seabed stirred the small fish, causing them to scatter in panicked bursts. The shark's instincts kicked in. It followed the fleeing bait fish, its keen senses alert to every movement. As Chloe adjusted her stance, dipping one foot slightly deeper into the water to catch a better angle, her bare shin brushed lightly against the shark's snout. The contact, though accidental and gentle, triggered an immediate reaction. The lemon shark whipped around with alarming speed, its dark eyes locking onto the unexpected touch. Without hesitation, it lunged forward, sinking its jagged teeth deep into Chloe's upper thigh. The sudden attack threw Chloe off balance, her body pitching forward as she fell into the shallow water with a splash. Her scream was quickly swallowed by the crashing waves, muffled and desperate. The sharp, serrated teeth punctured flesh with brutal efficiency, their crushing grip shaking her violently as the shark thrashed beneath the surface. Blood spilled out, tinting the crystalline water a deep, ominous red, the color swirling like ink in a glass. Nearby, the photo shoot crew watched in horror as the terrifying scene unfolded. The cameraman dropped his equipment in shock while the director barked urgent commands, trying to maintain order. Instinctively, a few crew members waded into the water, their feet sinking into the soft sand as they hurried toward Chloe. Their hands grasped her arms and torso, pulling her toward the safety of the waiting skiff bobbing just a few feet away. The chaos of cables and camera gear tangled their legs, hampering their movement and forcing them to battle both the shark and the obstacles on the seabed. Throughout the frantic rescue, the lemon shark maintained its relentless pace, circling Chloe as if weighing the threat before deciding whether to strike again. Its dorsal fin cut through the water's surface like a knife, a stark silhouette against the sunlit waves. The predator's power and determination were clear as it matched the rescuer's pace, unwilling to give up its prey so easily. When the crew finally lifted Chloe over the side of the boat, the shark broke off its pursuit, slipping silently beneath the waves and disappearing into the vast blue expanse. Chloe lay on the deck, her breathing ragged and uneven, the pain radiating from her torn thigh both sharp and dull in waves. Her blood stained the white fiberglass, a vivid reminder of the sudden violence that had shattered the serene scene. Medical personnel were called immediately, and Chloe was rushed to the nearest hospital on Nassau. Doctors described the bite wounds as deep and jagged, with punctures from the shark's needle-sharp teeth accompanied by ragged tears from the predator's powerful grip. Surgeons worked for hours, carefully repairing damaged muscles and nerves, while nurses administered pain relief and monitored for signs of infection. Despite the trauma, Chloe's resilience shone through. She remained conscious and calm, determined to survive and recover. The incident sent shockwaves through the fashion and marine communities alike. Photographers and models who had long dreamed of the perfect seaside shoot now faced the stark reality of nature's unpredictability. Experts weighed in on the attack, explaining that lemon sharks were generally curious but rarely aggressive toward humans. The presence of baitfish and the accidental contact had likely provoked the defensive bite. Conservationists emphasized that sharks were not mindless killers, but essential parts of the ocean's ecosystem, deserving respect and protection, even as humans learned to coexist with them. For Chloe, the attack was a brutal and painful chapter in her life, a sudden collision between beauty and brutality that left scars both physical and emotional. The months that followed were marked by grueling physical therapy and quiet moments of reflection. The ocean, once a place of awe and inspiration, became a symbol of both wonder and danger. Yet Chloe's spirit remained unbroken. She vowed to return to the water someday, not as a model, but as an advocate for shark conservation and safe interaction. In the end, the lemon shark's bite on that sunlit sandbar was a reminder of the fragile boundary between humans and the wild world they seek to capture. The shimmering turquoise waters held their secrets close, offering both breathtaking beauty and unexpected peril. The attack was a story of survival and resilience, a testament to the unpredictable dance between predator and prey beneath the waves. The Brisbane River system in Queensland, Australia, has experienced catastrophic flooding events throughout recorded history, with devastating inundations occurring roughly every decade, as heavy rainfall combined with high tides overwhelmed the region's drainage infrastructure. In March 2017, unprecedented rainfall associated with Tropical Cyclone Debbie caused the Brisbane River to rise rapidly beyond its banks, transforming suburban neighborhoods into temporary lakes filled with debris, displaced wildlife, and contaminated floodwater. Jake Turner had grown up along the banks of the Brisbane River in the suburb of Jindalee, where his family had operated a small marina and boat repair business for over 20 years. The 16-year-old high school student possessed extensive experience navigating the river system in various weather conditions, having spent countless hours kayaking, fishing, and exploring the waterways that defined his neighborhood's geography. His intimate knowledge of local currents, hidden obstacles, and safe passage routes made him an invaluable asset during emergencies, when professional rescue services became overwhelmed by the scale of the disaster. On March 25, 2017, floodwaters had transformed Turner's familiar neighborhood into an alien landscape, where street signs barely protruded above the muddy surface and houses stood partially submerged like islands in a vast brown sea. Despite evacuation orders from local authorities, many elderly residents had refused to abandon their homes. They now found themselves stranded on rooftops or upper floors as the water levels continued to rise. Turner had volunteered to assist official rescue operations by using his knowledge of local geography to locate trapped residents in areas that larger rescue boats could not safely navigate. Turner launched his lightweight kayak from higher ground near his family's marina, carrying emergency supplies, including life jackets, bottled water, and first aid equipment, which had been donated by evacuated neighbors who had taken refuge in temporary shelters. His mission involved searching house to house through the flooded subdivision to locate residents who might need immediate assistance or evacuation to safety. The floodwater, contaminated with sewage, chemicals, and debris from damaged buildings, presented numerous health hazards, in addition to the obvious dangers of swift currents and hidden obstacles. The bull sharks that had entered the Brisbane River system represented one of the most significant dangers of the flooding event. However, this threat remained largely unrecognized by rescue personnel and volunteers working in the contaminated water. Bull sharks possess a unique physiological adaptation that allows them to survive in both saltwater and freshwater environments, enabling them to travel far upstream during flood events when normal territorial boundaries become meaningless. These aggressive predators, known for their unpredictable behavior and powerful bite force, had likely been displaced from their usual coastal habitats by the massive freshwater discharge flowing into Moreton Bay. Turner discovered the Nakamura family stranded on the roof of their single-story home approximately 2 miles downstream from his starting point, where rising water had trapped the elderly couple and their disabled adult son without means of evacuation. The family had been waiting for rescue for over 6 hours, during which time the floodwater had continued rising and their physical condition had deteriorated significantly. Turner maneuvered his kayak alongside their house and began the delicate process of helping the 3 family members into his small craft, which required multiple trips to transport everyone safely. During the second rescue trip, as Turner paddled through chest-deep floodwater while towing Mrs. Nakamura in an emergency flotation device, he felt a sudden, crushing impact against his lower right leg that sent waves of agony through his entire body. The bull shark, apparently attracted by the vibrations and splashing associated with the rescue operation, had struck without warning from the murky water below. Its powerful jaws closed around Turner's leg just above the ankle, delivering a bite force that fractured bones and severed muscle tissue. At the same time, the teenager fought to maintain his grip on both the kayak and Mrs. Nakamura's safety line. The attack lasted approximately 15 seconds as Turner thrashed desperately in the contaminated floodwater, his movements constrained by his need to prevent Mrs. Nakamura from being swept away by the current. The bull shark, apparently confused by the unfamiliar freshwater environment and unusual prey behavior, released its grip and disappeared back into the muddy depths, where its presence was concealed from potential observers. Turner's immediate priority involved getting Mrs. Nakamura to safety, despite his severe injury and the growing cloud of blood that marked their location in the flood zone. Fighting through excruciating pain and potential shock, Turner managed to guide Mrs. Nakamura to the relative safety of a partially submerged bus stop structure, where she could maintain her position above the waterline. He then activated an emergency whistle that he carried for attracting rescue personnel, creating a piercing signal that could be heard over the ambient noise of rushing water and emergency vehicles operating throughout the flood zone. His calls for help were answered within minutes by a state emergency service rescue team that had been working in the immediate area. Professional rescue personnel immediately recognized the severity of Turner's injuries and initiated emergency medical procedures while continuing the evacuation of the Nakamura family. The shark bite had created multiple deep puncture wounds and extensive tissue damage that required immediate professional medical attention to prevent blood loss and infection from the contaminated floodwater. Turner was evacuated by helicopter to a hospital, where trauma surgeons worked to repair the damage caused by the bull shark's attack. The surgical team spent over 4 hours treating Turner's injuries, which included fractured bones in his lower leg, severed muscle tissue, and deep puncture wounds that had been contaminated with debris and bacteria from the floodwater. While the teenager ultimately retained full use of his leg after extensive physical therapy, the recovery process required months of treatment and rehabilitation. The incident marked the first confirmed bull shark attack in the Brisbane River system during a flood event, prompting authorities to include shark awareness in future emergency response protocols. Turner's actions during the flood rescue earned him recognition from both local authorities and national media. However, he consistently emphasized that his primary concern had been helping his neighbors, rather than seeking personal recognition. The attack highlighted the complex and often unexpected dangers present during natural disasters, when displaced wildlife and human emergency responses created potentially deadly encounters in familiar environments that extraordinary circumstances had transformed. False Bay, located on the eastern side of the Cape Peninsula near Cape Town, South Africa, had long been recognized as one of the world's premier locations for marine wildlife photography. In 2019, the bay's clear waters and abundant seal colonies continued to attract both great white sharks and adventurous photographers seeking dramatic underwater imagery. The area's unique geography, where warm Indian Ocean currents mixed with colder Atlantic waters, created an ecosystem that supported diverse marine life, while providing the crystal-clear visibility that underwater photographers prized above all else. Fashion photographer Lisa Grant had built her reputation, capturing ethereal underwater images that blurred the line between fashion and fine art. The 34-year-old London native had spent the previous decade perfecting techniques for shooting models in aquatic environments, from controlled swimming pools to challenging ocean locations around the Mediterranean. Her portfolio featured flowing fabrics that moved like liquid sculpture beneath the surface, creating dreamlike compositions that had earned her recognition in major fashion publications across Europe. Grant's latest project involved collaborating with Cape Town-based model Zara Okonkwo to create a series of images that would showcase both the beauty of South Africa's marine environment and cutting-edge underwater fashion photography techniques. The concept centered on Okonkwo floating gracefully among kelp forests while wearing specially designed, flowing fabrics that created stunning visual effects as they moved through the water. Grant had spent months planning the logistics, coordinating with local dive operators, and designing waterproof lighting systems that could illuminate her subjects without disturbing the delicate marine ecosystem. On November 23, 2019, conditions appeared perfect for the ambitious photo shoot. The morning brought calm seas and exceptional underwater visibility, extending over 40 feet, allowing Grant's team to set up their equipment near a thriving kelp forest approximately 2 miles offshore from Seal Island. The production crew included dive safety coordinator Willem van der Merwe, underwater lighting specialist Antonio Rodriguez, and assistant photographer Kenji Nakamura, who would capture behind-the-scenes footage of the elaborate setup process. Okonkwo, an experienced freediver who had worked on several previous underwater fashion shoots, descended gracefully into the kelp forest wearing flowing white and silver fabrics that billowed dramatically as she moved through the water column. Grant positioned herself 15 feet away with her specially modified underwater camera system, capturing images of the model as she posed among the swaying kelp fronds and interacted with curious seals that approached to investigate the unusual activity in their territory. The nearby seal colony, consisting of several hundred Cape fur seals, provided both an enchanting backdrop for the photo shoot and an unfortunate attractant for the area's apex predator population. Marine biologists had documented regular great white shark activity in these waters, particularly during the seal pupping season, when young, inexperienced seals became easy targets for hungry predators. The production team had consulted with local shark experts before the shoot and was assured that morning hours typically represented the safest time for underwater activities. The 18-foot great white shark approached the photo shoot location with the stealth that had made these predators successful hunters for millions of years. The combination of seal activity, unusual lighting equipment, and human movement patterns had likely triggered the shark's predatory instincts, causing it to investigate what appeared to be a gathering of potential prey animals. Grant later reported that she had noticed unusual behavior among the seals approximately 2 minutes before the attack, as several animals suddenly fled the area despite showing no previous signs of distress. The attack occurred with devastating speed as Okonkwo stood poised near the edge of the kelp forest, her flowing fabrics creating striking silhouettes against the filtered sunlight streaming down from the surface. The great white burst upward from the deeper water below, its massive jaws opened wide as it targeted what it perceived as an injured seal floating near the surface. The shark's teeth closed around Okonkwo's left calf, penetrating both her wetsuit and the decorative fabric while delivering a crushing bite that fractured bones and severed muscle tissue. Grant, positioned directly in front of the attack, captured the horrifying moment through her camera viewfinder before dropping her equipment and swimming frantically toward her injured model. Okonkwo thrashed desperately in the shark's grip, her training as a freediver allowing her to maintain enough composure to avoid inhaling water despite the excruciating pain. The great white maintained its hold for nearly 20 seconds, shaking its head violently in the characteristic manner that these predators use to disorient and weaken their prey. Van der Merwe, the dive safety coordinator, had positioned himself above the main shooting area specifically to watch for potential dangers. Upon witnessing the attack, he immediately deployed an emergency shark deterrent device, while simultaneously signaling for the surface support team to prepare for an emergency medical evacuation. His quick actions, combined with Okonkwo's desperate struggles, apparently convinced the great white to release its grip and retreat toward the deeper waters surrounding the kelp forest. The ascent to the surface became a race against time, as blood from Okonkwo's wounds attracted several smaller shark species to the area. Rodriguez and Nakamura formed a protective circle around the injured model. At the same time, Grant and Van der Merwe guided her toward the surface, monitoring her condition for signs of shock or blood loss that could prove fatal before medical help arrived. The entire rescue operation, from the initial attack to reaching the surface, took less than 3 minutes, but it felt like hours to everyone involved. Emergency medical personnel were already standing by aboard the support vessel, having been alerted by Van der Merwe's surface signals during the ascent. They immediately began treating Okonkwo's severe injuries while the boat raced toward Cape Town's harbor at maximum speed. Paramedics applied pressure bandages and administered pain medication during the 20-minute transit, working to stabilize her condition before transfer to a trauma center equipped to handle complex bite wounds. Surgeons at the hospital in Groot Schuur spent over 5 hours repairing the damage to Okonkwo's calf, reconstructing torn muscle tissue, setting fractured bones, and addressing potential nerve damage that could affect her long-term mobility. While she eventually made a full recovery after months of physical therapy, the incident effectively ended her career as an underwater model. It prompted significant changes to safety protocols for fashion photography in waters where sharks are present. The attack footage, captured inadvertently by Grant's automatic camera system, later provided valuable research data for marine biologists studying great white shark behavior and attack patterns. However, the images from what was intended to be a celebration of underwater beauty instead served as a sobering reminder of the inherent dangers present in the ocean's most pristine environments.